Can we talk about one thing I liked about the movie real quick?
Go ahead.
I like the ending.
Oh yeah.
With the last little beat when it turns out that Madeline can see the gargoyles too, and she gives them the wink, and it's just
Yeah.
like completely, and their jaws drop,
Yeah.
like they drop off.
The
It's a hyperbole.
All right, and we are here again, and we are back again. As always, I'm Matt.
I'm Drew.
And this is a sequel podcast. This is our sequel podcast. This is where we talk about sequels from the past. We are continuing on our Disney animated sequel list. And today we are doing Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, the follow-up to the 1996 Hunchback of Notre Dame. Before we get started, we only have 3 movies left on this Disney animated sequel list. And in hindsight, it's unfortunate that we're doing this movie today because I'm not crazy about the first Hunchback of Notre Dame movie.
I had no problems with it. I really actually liked it a lot. I liked the themes that it was exploring. I liked the fact that, he didn't end up with a girl at the end. But, we're not talking about that movie right now. We're talking about the sequel. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Yeah, I'll introduce the breakdown. Let's go ahead and jump into the breakdown for Hunchback of Notre Dame 2.
So the second movie starts, we are with Quasimodo, we are in France, and basically we just have this kind of big opening musical number about how we're all back. So after this we cut to some circus people, and there's a leader named Sarouche, and he has this kind of female counterpart, and her name is Madeline. And what we discover through this relationship is that she basically was living in the streets. He rescued her, kind of gave her a life, and now he kind of holds that over her.
We don't learn that right off the bat, but that does come back around. Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm just we're knocking out the plot.
We're knocking it out. Bang, bang, bang.
So after Madeline's situation is explained to us with Sarouche, we kind of jump back to Quasimodo, and we also reveal that some time has passed. And we know some time has passed because there's a little boy. And this little boy is the son of Esmeralda and Phoebus.
Yeah, the child who is played by Haley Joel Osment.
Haley Joel Osment.
Is 6 years old.
Yeah, so 6 years has passed. This is their son. He hangs out with Quasimodo a bunch. He's kind of like the uncle. After all of that, kind of have just a bunch of talking about how, there's been some thefts in town. But all this really leads towards Quasimodo finally meeting Madeline for this first time.
The first true encounter with Madeline and Quasimodo takes place in the bell tower or in the church tower. Sees that he is deformed, sees that he's a hunchback, and then she's shocked and leaves. Quasimodo is stricken by that, and then he immediately goes into a song about love.
Yeah.
How he loves this woman who just scorned him.
After all of that, she goes back to Sarouche, and Sarouche tells her that she needs to go befriend Quasimodo so that they can steal the bell, because they believe that the bell is very valuable.
There's a very specific bell that is valuable called La Fidèle.
Yeah, and he's gonna he's gonna try to sell it to make some money because he's a thief. There's already been a bunch of thefts in town.
Well, that's the whole shtick, is that the circus comes into town, and then while Sarouche is distracting them with the show, all of the other kind of circus hands go around and they pickpocket all of the distracted townsfolk or locals.
Madeline goes to hang out with Quasimodo. We kind of get a bunch of these scenes where they are dancing in the rain, and the town is kind of creepily watching them dance in the rain. And they're saying wow, Quasimodo found a girl. Eventually this leads back up to the top of his tower where she sees the bell. Quasimodo still doesn't know at the time that this is her intention, but then some of the people start to warn him of this, like Phoebus. He thinks that Madeline might be up to something, and Quasimodo kind of rejects that, and he does a cliche thing oh, you suspect her to be bad because she could never love me. And Phoebus is all no, I didn't say that. All right, just saying, let's keep an eye out and stuff like that. So Quasimodo discovers that Madeline is working with Sarouche because Sarouche eventually somehow tricks Phoebus and tells him that Madeline is the one stealing everything. So
he pins it on Madeline.
Yeah, he pins it on her. So they arrest Madeline. Quasimodo's all heard about it, but then
Sarouche and his 2 lackeys are free to go into the cathedral and steal the bell.
So also around this time, Phoebus and Esmeralda's son, Haley Joel Osment, he sees that Sarouche is also doing some bad guy stuff, so he's going to go alert them about it. But in the process, he gets captured by Sarouche. So now this kind of becomes a rescue mission of getting Haley Joel Osment back, as well as kind of stopping the bell theft. Yada yada yada. All the good guys show up, they stop the bad guys, they get the son back. Quasimodo and Madeline, I guess, fall in love. And the whole thing was, I guess, Sarouche, the way he treated Madeline was that he always said, you're really beautiful, but you're only good for one thing. You're only good for your looks. And I guess Quasimodo is able to see past her looks, and because of that, she's able to see past his. And this is going to be the connection that, I guess, makes them fall in love. So they fall in love, they yell out to the town, "We love each other," and then like just like roll credits, and
That was that was a pretty rushed summary,
Yeah.
but it hit all the beats.
yeah, that is the rushed kind of plot synopsis of Hunchback of Notre Dame 2.
Yeah.
So before we kind of get into the ranking of this, I guess the reason why that was so rushed is because the movie itself is not very engaging and the plot is not very engaging, so it feels as if they rushed to make this. So I'm going to kind of be rushed to break it down. And maybe I'll let you kind of get into more of some stuff that you want to talk about.
The one thing that was immediately depressing about this movie, and the one thing that really made me not care, was I really liked and I really respected that the first movie had Quasimodo. Like, it teased a love interest, but at the end of the day, they didn't end up together, and it wasn't really about romance. It was almost purely, at least as far as the main story arc goes, it was purely about acceptance, and there wasn't really romance in it. And this whole movie is about, well, what if now he's in love? And it's like the whole point of the first one, for me at least, or the whole thing that really helped it stick out, was that we didn't have to go into that territory that Disney goes into over and over and over again. And now for this sequel, we're going into it head first, and we can touch on some other minor things that really just made this sour to me. But that's the big one right there. The big reason that I didn't really care to pay too much attention was because that's what they're coming at me with the plot.
Well, you also mentioned too that right away the animation kind of takes you off, because the first Hunchback of Notre Dame, despite how I feel about it, and I don't like it very much, the animation is really good, and they do a good job of kind of showing the landscape of the town with these big castles, and there's just kind of a different kind of drawing to it that makes it pop. Whereas then as soon as we started this one, you were like, oh my god, this looks horrible.
This looks a lot like King of Thieves, which came out like 10 years earlier, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that tells you that right there.
Well, what I'll say now, what I don't like about it, and the main thing probably is really kind of what you already touched on, which is the love story. And in regards to Madeline's character, who's played by Jennifer Love Hewitt, you know, she meets Quasimodo once, is disgusted by him. She meets Quasimodo a second time, all of a sudden realizes that he, don't judge a book by its cover, just because he's doing it. Like, he's just hanging around with the kid. He just looks like a nice role model. And then...
Well, that's the whole thing that connects back to her relationship with Sarouche, was that's kind of like the relationship she had with Sarouche. And this is a pure version of that, where it's Quasimodo and Zephyr, or Haley Joel Osment.
Yes, and that's fine and stuff, but there is no time put into their relationship. Like, they have one kind of dance in the rain, and all of a sudden we're supposed to believe that they've fallen in love. Like, there's no kind of connection besides maybe 2 scenes worth of information as to why they would like each other. But by the end of the movie, they are in love, and it's like, Jesus, you just met this person.
It is very rushed, and like you said, they don't fall in love, they sing about being in love.
Well, being in love and falling in love is almost like the same thing, especially with these Disney movies, because it just takes a montage or a song, and then they usually come back around.
This is especially rushed. They probably thought they could like get away with it for characters like this.
Well,
but yeah, it is noticeably lacking.
I find it interesting that he even wants to fall in love, because he is like a man of God.
He was raised by men of God. He is not a man of God.
I understand that, but like, he works in the church. He's kind of like an usher boy. I think they could have done more if they focused on a relationship with him and somebody else where they both have an interest in something that they love to do. And he could have had like a really strong friendship that turns into love. And I think that would have been more believable than just, I see you, you see me, and I love you. It's like, well, let's actually get into what makes 2 people fall in love, since the first one was just about looks with Esmeralda and with Kevin Kline. So as always on this podcast, we ask 3 questions that lead to a final vote of, is it worth going back again? But the first question is, does it work as a sequel? And I'll just start off first, and I'll say, no, it does not work as a sequel. Like I said, the first one in itself has problems, but it is a complete story. I don't see the need to continue this story. It feels almost like they made this out of necessity because they felt bad for not giving Quasimodo a love interest at the end of the first one. But like you said, and I would also argue that that's not the point of the first one, and that's actually kind of the nice thing about the first one. So to do additional story where now it's all about giving him a love interest that also has some kind of devastated backstory, for me, it's just not worth coming back and bringing these characters back. So for those reasons, it does not work as a sequel.
It doesn't work for me, honestly, just based off of the original movie. There was no grounds for a sequel. It was kind of similar to Atlantis, I would say, like lightning in a bottle, where you can't do anything similar to this ever again, let alone a direct sequel, so don't even bother.
Yeah.
With Atlantis, I think there's enough of a world behind it that you could just give it to someone and they could have fun with it. And clearly that wasn't the case in execution, but at least, there was the idea. With this one, I just don't think there's enough of an idea. The story of the original is perfect on its own, or at least good enough on its own, especially for something like this that doesn't work for the reasons we mentioned, does not work as a sequel for me.
So our second question is going to be, is it enjoyable / entertaining? And I think based kind of on our first responses, it's going to be pretty obvious. I do not think this movie was enjoyable or entertaining. The animation right out the gate does not look good. The musical numbers are kind of weird, to be honest. What they're singing about oftentimes is just kind of like not important or relevant. You're just kind of singing a song to sing it. And, I really like emotionally based songs, or I like you to sing for a reason. And for this, it feels like they were just singing so they could fill the runtime.
I wish I could say that it was enjoyable / entertaining. At the very least, if they're not going to do something new, the whole premise surrounds another festival and the villain is the ringleader of a circus. So at least you could do something fun and crazy and different with that. So that at least gave me some hope, but they don't follow through. It just ends up falling flat. It's
just about getting the bell.
It just ends up being about getting the bell. The circus is just there as a tool. So it's going to be an X for me.
So the third question is, does it need to exist?
No, it doesn't need to exist. The original movie did not need a sequel at all. This is one of the few that I'll just because I really like the idea of how can you mine this material, this IP, this intellectual property, and get a sequel that's engaging and interesting and new and different. And I really don't like shutting down discussions like that just based off of, no, the original's perfect or the original's good enough and there's just nothing else there that needs to be explored. But with the case of Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame, there is no room for a sequel. There's no room for any additional material. The first one got as great as it could on its own. Anything else is just going to fall flat, and that's what this movie did.
I'll even be a little bit more controversial than this, and I'll say that I don't really think the first one needs to exist. I think the first one has some really good concepts. I don't agree with the execution of it. I don't agree with the finishing out of certain storylines with characters, but I'm still okay with it existing. Yeah, this movie, I do not think it needs to exist. I honestly don't know why they made this movie. I don't really know how they got all the talent to come back, but they did. They made it. But if you're like a kid, I think, like you said, you can just watch the first one and you don't need to watch the second one. We don't need to see what happened with Quasimodo's love life. That was never his problem.
That was never anyone's problem.
It's what he thought he wanted, and then it turns out that's not what he wanted. So for you to come back around saying no, this is what he wanted. It's well, you're only saying that now because you made the movie exist, but I'm saying it doesn't need to exist. So if you're keeping track at home, that's going to be what we call a Tarzan and Jane's. That's going to be 6 X's, no check marks, which means it's going to get 1 giant X, no asterisks. And yeah, it's unfortunate because this is going to be another kind of stinker on the list. But then again, I'm not surprised because we are doing Disney animated sequels.
What's unfortunate especially is I think we would have had a lot more fun talking about the original and just kind of discussing our thoughts on that one.
Yeah, probably. Because the original has a lot more things.
But this isn't that podcast. This is the sequel podcast.
So yes, that's going to be our breakdown on Hunchback of Notre Dame 2. As always, make sure you like, subscribe, comment below. Check out our other episodes. We only have 2 Disney animated sequels left on this list, and then we will be jumping into new categories of the sequel verse. And yeah, you got anything else to add, Drew?
That's a negatory over here, Captain.
All right, and we'll see you next time.